There is something strange about jealousy. We usually notice the feeling, but rarely stop to ask what is underneath it. Someone succeeds, and another person becomes uncomfortable. Someone becomes confident, and suddenly they're called arrogant. Someone finds happiness, and somehow their happiness becomes irritating. We see the reaction, but we don't always see the fear. Because jealousy is rarely just, "I want what you have." Sometimes it is, "What does what you have say about me?" And that question can be much more painful. Carl Jung spent much of his work exploring the hidden parts of the human personality, the parts we don't like to acknowledge, the feelings that threaten the image we have created of ourselves. And jealousy can become one of those uncomfortable mirrors, because when someone else's life begins to shine, it can illuminate something inside us that we have spent years avoiding. A forgotten dream, an abandoned ambition, a fear of being left behind, or the painful suspicion that perhaps we are not becoming who we once hoped we would become. Perhaps the first fear is the simplest: being left behind. Not necessarily financially, not necessarily socially, sometimes psychologically. A friend begins changing. They read more, they become healthier, they become more confident, they start setting boundaries, their priorities change, and suddenly, the old relationship doesn't feel quite the same. The jealous person may not consciously think, "They're leaving me behind." Instead, they may think, "They're becoming different. They think they're better than us. They've changed." But beneath those words, there may be another fear. What if I can no longer belong beside them? Sometimes jealousy is not simply about wanting another person's life. It is the fear that their growth will change the relationship forever. There is another fear, perhaps even deeper: being exposed. Imagine believing that everyone around you is doing fine. Then someone close to you begins succeeding. Suddenly, comparison becomes unavoidable. Their success doesn't create your insecurity, it reveals it. And that distinction matters. Jung's shadow contains parts of ourselves that we would rather not identify with. The ambitious person who insists they don't care about success. The lonely person who insists they prefer isolation. The person who wants recognition, but pretends recognition is meaningless. When another person openly possesses something we've secretly denied wanting, the discomfort can become intense, because their life has exposed a truth about ours. Not that we are failures, not that they are better, simply that there is something we have not yet made peace with, but there is one fear that sits underneath many others. The fear that perhaps your success is proof that their excuses are no longer enough. And once that fear appears, jealousy can become something much more personal. One of the easiest ways to hide jealousy is to make the thing you're jealous of seem unimportant. You tell someone about an opportunity. It's not really that big. You accomplish something you've worked toward for years. A lot of people are doing that now. You become financially stable. Money isn't everything. You become confident. You've become full of yourself. Notice something. The person may not actually be saying, "I don't want what you have." They're saying, "What you have isn't worth wanting." And psychologically, that can be much easier to live with. Because if your achievement is ordinary, then they don't have to ask themselves why they haven't pursued something similar. If your confidence is arrogance, they don't have to wonder why they struggle to believe in themselves. If your happiness is superficial, they don't have to confront their own unhappiness. Sometimes, reducing another person's light is simply a way of making your own darkness feel less visible. Another fear reveals itself through attention. Someone who truly doesn't care usually doesn't need to keep checking, But jealousy can create a strange contradiction. I don't care about them. And yet, they know what you're doing. They notice when you disappear. They know when you've changed your appearance. They hear about your new opportunity. They notice who you're spending time with. They somehow know that your life is moving forward. This doesn't automatically mean jealousy. People are curious. People pay attention. But when attention becomes persistent, especially when it's paired with criticism, the contradiction becomes interesting. Why spend so much energy observing a life you insist doesn't matter to you? Sometimes, because comparison requires information, you cannot know whether you're behind unless you're watching where someone else is going. But perhaps the fear becomes clearest when other people notice you. You can sometimes tolerate another person's success, as long as nobody makes a big deal about it. But then someone says, "You're really good at this. You've changed so much. I'm impressed by what you've built." And suddenly, the atmosphere changes. A joke appears. Someone changes the subject. Someone mentions a mistake you made years ago. Or perhaps they simply become silent. Why? Because praise creates something jealousy struggles with: social confirmation. It's one thing to privately believe someone is doing well. It's another thing to hear everyone else say it too. Now, the comparison isn't happening inside one person's mind. The entire room seems to be participating. And for someone whose identity depends on feeling superior, that can be deeply uncomfortable. And then there is one of the most painful fears: losing the version of you they were comfortable with. Maybe you used to ask for their approval. You don't anymore. Maybe you used to explain yourself. You don't anymore. Maybe you tolerated jokes that hurt. You don't anymore. Maybe you were uncertain, and they always seemed confident around you. Then you changed. You became stronger, and suddenly they keep talking about who you used to be. You weren't like this before. You used to be more fun. You think you're better now. I don't know what happened to you. Sometimes, what they're mourning isn't your old personality. It's their old position in your life. Because when you become more secure, the relationship may have to become more equal, and equality can feel threatening to someone who built their identity around being above you. Beneath much of jealousy, there can be a fear we rarely discuss: the fear of becoming irrelevant. Human beings want to matter. We want our presence to mean something. We want to feel that our lives have weight. So when someone close to us begins moving forward, especially someone we once felt ahead of, their growth can feel like our disappearance. Not literally, psychologically. The friend who once came to you for advice no longer needs it. The sibling who once looked up to you becomes independent. The colleague you once overshadowed starts receiving recognition. The person you thought would always remain behind you catches up. And suddenly, a question appears. If I'm no longer ahead of them, who am I? That is not a question about you. It is a question about identity, and beneath the fear of being left behind, there may be an even deeper fear. What if I was never enough? This is where jealousy can become painful, because if another person succeeds, and you interpret their success as evidence against yourself, then every achievement they make becomes another reminder. They didn't create your insecurity, but they keep giving it something to look at. And this is why some people become strangely critical whenever another person grows. Criticism creates distance. Distance reduces comparison, and reduced comparison creates temporary relief. But relief isn't healing. The insecurity remains, waiting for the next person who reminds them of what they wish they could become. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, the person we envy isn't actually the person we think they are. We are comparing our private reality with their public reality, their best moments against our worst ones, their confidence against our doubts, their beginning against our middle. And once you understand that, jealousy starts revealing something very different. It isn't always telling us, "I want their life." Sometimes it is whispering, "I want permission to believe in my own." Perhaps this is the part of jealousy that we understand least. We imagine jealousy as wanting another person's possessions, their money, their relationship, their appearance, their success. But Jung's psychology invites us to look deeper. Sometimes, what we envy isn't what someone possesses. It's who they are allowed to be. They speak freely. You wish you could. They say no without guilt. You wish you could. They pursue something uncertain while you remain afraid. They walk away from relationships that hurt them. You wish you had their courage. They seem comfortable being themselves, and perhaps that is what hurts the most. Because somewhere inside you, there may be a version of yourself waiting for permission to exist, and another person's freedom can remind you of it. There is another fear hiding underneath jealousy, wasted potential, the painful realization that perhaps you could have done more. Perhaps you could have taken the risk, started the business, written the book, left the marriage, learned the skill, traveled, created, begun again, but you didn't. And then someone else does. Suddenly, their courage becomes uncomfortable to watch, not because their courage is wrong, but because it awakens your memory. The memory of all the times you told yourself, "One day." And perhaps jealousy is sometimes grief wearing anger as a disguise, grief for the life you once imagined, but never gave yourself permission to pursue. This is why some people become uncomfortable when you change. Your transformation creates a new question. If you can change, perhaps they can too. And that possibility can be frightening, because change removes excuses. If you were always unhappy, they could accept their unhappiness. If you were always uncertain, they could accept their own uncertainty. If you were always struggling, they could feel less alone in their struggle. But when you begin healing, you quietly prove that another way exists. And sometimes, people don't resent the person who changed. They resent the possibility that they might have to change too. If someone feels jealous of you, you don't have to make yourself smaller, but you also don't have to make yourself larger. You don't need to prove that you're successful. You don't need to demonstrate that you're smarter. You don't need to remind anyone that you're doing better. That's still comparison. Real confidence is quieter. You can enjoy what you've built without needing someone else to feel bad about it. You can accept praise without needing admiration. You can succeed without turning success into an identity. And you can recognize someone else's insecurity without becoming arrogant about recognizing it. Because the moment you need another person to feel small so that you can feel big, you've entered the same psychological game. So the next time you notice jealousy, whether it comes from someone else or from somewhere inside yourself, don't rush to judge it. Ask what it is protecting. What fear is underneath it? Fear of being forgotten, fear of being left behind, fear of not being enough, fear of wasted potential, fear that someone else's life is proof that yours should have been different. These questions don't make jealousy disappear, but they make it conscious, and what becomes conscious can finally be understood. Perhaps that is what Jung meant when he encouraged us to face the parts of ourselves we would rather leave in darkness. Not so that we can become perfect, but so that unconscious forces stop secretly directing our lives. The mirror was never meant to tell you whether you were better than someone else. It was meant to help you see yourself. Maybe you've spent years wondering why someone couldn't simply be happy for you, why your success bothered them, why your happiness seemed to make them distant, why your confidence changed the relationship, why they kept bringing you back to who you used to be. Perhaps some of what you sensed was real, perhaps some of it wasn't. We can never completely know another person's inner world, but we can know this: you don't have to live inside it. You don't have to monitor their reactions. You don't have to hide your good news. You don't have to apologize for changing. You don't have to become smaller so someone else can remain comfortable, and you don't have to become bigger so someone else can feel small. There is another way. You can simply become yourself. So, what do jealous people secretly fear? Perhaps more than anything, they fear what your existence might reveal, that they have dreams they abandoned, that they are less satisfied than they pretend, that they have spent years comparing themselves to others, that they don't know who they are without being above someone, that another person's freedom might expose their own fear, that your growth might force them to confront their own. But there is something important to remember. Their fear is not your responsibility. You cannot heal it for them, and you should not build your life around avoiding it. If someone is uncomfortable because you've become more honest, keep becoming honest. If someone is uncomfortable because you've become healthier, keep becoming healthier. If someone is uncomfortable because you've stopped accepting disrespect, keep your boundary. If someone is uncomfortable because you've finally begun living, don't return to a smaller life, simply to make the room feel familiar again. But don't turn your growth into a weapon either. You don't need to look down on the people who haven't found their way. You don't need to prove that you are ahead, because eventually you realize there was never a race. There was only your life. Their life, their wounds, your wounds, their unfinished dreams, your unfinished dreams, and somewhere between all of them is the quiet work of becoming whole. Perhaps that is the greatest freedom of all, to stop asking, "Why aren't they happy for me?" and begin asking, "Am I finally happy with who I am becoming?" Because when the answer becomes yes, jealousy loses much of its power. You don't need to know who envies you. You don't need to know who feels threatened. You don't need to know who is watching. You simply keep walking, not above them, not beneath them, beside your own life. And perhaps that is where comparison finally ends. Have you ever realized that someone's jealousy wasn't really about what you had, but about what your life reminded them they could have become? And if you've ever experienced it, did you respond by shrinking yourself? Or did you eventually learn to keep growing without needing to prove anything? Tell me in the comments.